Yeah, no, we for those watching, for those listening in, like we just had rehearsal yesterday for a gig we're doing on Monday. So here we are. Man, it's good to see you.
Good to see you again.
Thank you for making yourself available today. I really
Anything for you,
appreciate
man.
this. Oh, please, it's my pleasure. My pleasure. So I was just giving the audience a little bit of a breakdown
Great.
of what we're about to talk about today, like
Great.
drums and bass, like
Yes.
the concrete foundation, the lifeline. The Anthony Jackson just says the rhythm section, like he
Yes.
bypasses all the harmony instruments. He's like, no, we are the rhythm section. I
Yes.
mean, for what it's worth, Ron Carter says the same thing. Right? He
Absolutely.
he's like the rhythm section is drums and bass. Everything else is everything else.
I agree. You can't argue. Well, I won't say you can't argue with Ron. I would say you shouldn't argue with Ron.
No, why? Why?
Absolutely.
There's no point. Anyway, so why don't you just introduce yourself to the audience a little bit? I just told them that we've been working together since I believe 2011 or
Yeah.
2012. You're a drummer. You teach at Juilliard. That's as far as I got.
Cool. Yeah. And I would say, I've been teaching at Juilliard for 6 years, but before all the education stuff, man, I'm just a jazz drummer, and also moving to New York, I became more of a session drummer and jazz drummer,
Right.
and I would say being in New York, for 19, 20 years, I had to learn how to really lock in with some great bass players. And you're definitely at the top of the list. I've been really fortunate to play with a lot of great bass players.
Mm.
And I always like to use the term that McBride, for those that may not know me, I also spent many years working with Christian McBride, Kurt Elling, Nicholas Payton, a lot of different people I've been fortunate to work with. And one of the things that Christian McBride taught me a lot about was he always said the connection between the bass and drums is a marriage. It's like a marriage. And he said, and if the bass and drum aren't getting along, it's not going to be a happy home,
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Yeah. Yeah.
so,
Yeah.
yeah, so I learned very much that my connection with bass players is always the sort of paramount thing. And so I always, like when I start out playing a gig, no matter where, like even with you and I the other day,
Right.
the first thing I check in with is like, okay, where's the bass?
Right.
And then once we're cool, then I start sonically opening up my ears to other
Yeah. Yeah.
things
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
in the room, because I feel like for the drummer, there's nothing and nobody more important to us than to lock in. And then I think probably another part of my journey that's important to mention here, because you and I worked in this capacity as well, is my relationship as a producer.
Right.
I spent many years as a sideman, and then I started producing records under my production imprint, UOJ Productions, where we produced over 40 records for independent artists and all that through since 2010.
Wow.
And that really allowed me to clue into the power of drummers and basses even more, because even when I wasn't playing on the session, some artists was, sign with me and say, hey, Ulysses, I want you to not only produce, but I want you to play. Other artists would be like, Ulysses, I love you as a drummer, but I either have another drummer or band I've been working with, or, I'd actually love to just have you on the side of the booth,
Right.
where you can really be my eyes and ears. And I have to tell you, understanding that connection between bassists and drummers as a producer was a whole other thing.
Mm.
Because then I started, like, you're like on my short list of like 2 to 3 cats that I know I can call, that like if you're in the booth, you will not only play and do a great job, but you're going to play from the perspective of what the producer needs and what the record needs.
Right.
And so I find that I learned how to become that kind of musician. So that's also a whole other perspective that I bring, I think, to my musicianship and, all the other stuff, whether it's teaching or whatever. But I feel like at my core, I'm a jazz drummer. I love to play. And also I try to play from sort of the large picture perspective of what does the music need? What does the record need?
Right.
And that's why I think guys like you and I definitely have found camaraderie.
So. Oh yeah, no doubt, no doubt. No, it's. I was just going to. I mean, you kind of answered it already, but I was just going to bring up the point of, do bassists, do drummers, like, do we, since from starting from our function in the band, do we have a better perspective in terms of like a bird's eye view? Do we, like, is our function basically giving us a running start to be producers?
Yeah, I absolutely. So I'll tell you something that Herlin Riley told me many years ago when I was studying with him. And for those that don't know, Herlin Riley is an incredible drummer from New Orleans, Louisiana. He played with Wynton Marsalis for many years. He was in the drum chair of Ahmed Jamal for many years, and he's incredible. And so for a period of time, I studied with him as a Juilliard student. And I never forget, I always felt he made all these great musical decisions. And I remember asking him one day, I said, Herlin, how do you do what you do? Like, how do you make these decisions that feel so incredibly intuitive to the music? Right. And he said, Ulysses, I sit behind the kit, but my ears are out in front of the kit. And man, when he told me that, it made so much sense to me. And so to your point about, do we get at sort of an extra advantage as bass players and drummers to be producers? I absolutely think so, because as a singer or a horn player, you are very singular and you're very sort of self-focused, right? Whereas when you're a bass player, and definitely bass players and drummers, we have to learn everybody's part, right? And so, you know, I find that being a producer, you need to have like a set of ears that is incredibly objective, and always use, you know, the analogy or the metaphor of going to a museum, and, you know, a singer is the person that's right up on the photo or in the photo, right? To me, what a producer does is step back and take the whole picture and understands what are the things that not only need to make this picture better, but what are all the other surrounding things in this room that makes this picture come to life and people's depiction of the picture come to life. And I think no other instruments, more so than drums and bass, have that ability to do that.
Yeah. And, you know, it should also be noted that, like, singers have, you know, singers and the people in the front, like, have that singular vision, because that's what they're there for.
Exactly.
That is a lot of work. That's a lot.
Absolutely.
We're not taking anything away from that. That's a lot of responsibility. That's just, you know, that there is a division of labor here.
Yeah, and I think it's important too that, you know, I always tell people, like, for my business I have here with my family, we have a saying, and that saying is, everybody needs to run and stay in their own lane. Right. And so to your point, that's nothing negative about the singer. I'm uncomfortable sitting in front like that. You know, I love being in the background. I mean, I'm fine to get up in the front and do a lecture or do one, you know, some chats here and there, but I relish and enjoy the background. Just like singers are called to be in the foreground and horn players, and they relish in that space. So it shouldn't be a competition. If anything, I produce more records for singers because they're like, Ulysses, I trust that you're going to make sure everything going on behind me, musically speaking, is going to be together.
It's cool. Yeah, most definitely. Yeah. So, well, I mean, all of that said, you know, that kind of brings me to what we said we were going to do, which is, you know, come up with these 5 rhythm sections. You know, that have meaning to us, that somehow influenced us, whatever, you know, that just stand out, of course. And, you know, having said that, I also want to just quickly drop this on you, because I've had the hardest time finding 5, right? It was
hard at first.
This was not easy, right? I was like, wait, but you know, am I not leaving all of these people out? So, having said that, at the end of, you know, if we have enough time, I want to do like a quick fire 5 honorable mentions.
Great.
All right. We don't have to do it now. We don't have to think about it now. But since you're my guest, I want you to start. Why don't you do one and then I'll do one?
Absolutely. So for me, the first album that I had to start with is the album that changed my life and is the reason that I really got into jazz. And that is Miles Davis's Milestones. And the drum and bass team is Philly Joe Jones and Paul Chambers. That really cemented for me the jazz straight ahead sound of how do you play something here? How do you play up? You know, how do you play a ballad? PC and Philly Joe really laid that down for me. And I think that so much of how I approach jazz starts with them as the foundation.
Oh wow, that's no doubt. No, that was definitely PC was right up in there with me. I did leave him out because, you know, because of who I'm about to name right now. Okay. Because, so for those who know me, and I've certainly not been shy about this, but I'm a huge Ahmad Jamal fan, right?
Yeah.
And I wanted to take it back to his trio with Israel Crosby and Vernal Fournier.
Wow.
Right? The interplay between those two, you know, the concept that Ahmad Jamal put forward, and then the interplay between those two, for me, just opened myself up, opened my psyche, my spirit up to jazz. You know, let's
Mm-hmm.
be real. Like up until then, yeah, I was kind of getting into it. I was kind of listening to it. You know, but once I heard, I did not put the Live at the Pershing album into my playlist.
Okay.
But I put another album in there, which was done a little later, called All of You. Right.
Wow, I
Uh,
gotta check that out.
yeah, and that again is a live album, but it's yeah, it knocks me out. Is it the way they and again like this meticulous working on parts and crafting something. The funny thing is with trio, at least the way I see it, the way I hear it, right? With trio, you have all these possibilities, right?
Yep.
And then when you really go down, when you really start playing, like you have to be very your choices have to be very distinct, because
Absolutely.
it's just the three of you, right?
And it affects everything.
Exactly. So I find that fascinating. That was my first that's the Amateur Mall trio with Vernel Fournier and Israel Crosby. Just totally did it for me.
Well, and it's funny because you took my second one, because I was going to use them because they really impacted me in a really interesting way. It's funny you chose them, but not the classic Pershing record. I chose Pershing,
Yeah.
but another record that blew my mind, I don't know if you're hip to it, is the George Shearing record called. Do you know how George Shearing? You know, he took them at a certain point, and they were much older.
Yeah.
And the way that they played, and like you said, the interplay, and it's this perfect balance between foundation and music, just musicality. It's you know, So I'll use that dual pair as my second.
All right, so then here's my second. All right,
Okay.
again, trio recording. But this time, I went a different direction. At least I think a different direction. I hear it differently, which is the Oscar Peterson trio with Ray Brown and Ed Thigpen.
I was wondering which one you were going to, because I love Ed. I had a chance to spend time with him, but I also love those records with Bobby Durham and Lou Hayes.
Yeah. So pretty much any of those records. Let me just see. I need to bring this up real quick because I forgot which album I put. I forgot which. You can't hear this now, but it's live at the CBC studios from 1960.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah. So of course there is, again, like the famous record "We Get Requests," no doubt, like super famous.
Great record.
And fantastic record. And from what I understand, Ray Brown actually took it upon himself to, take Ed Thigpen aside and say, listen, we are going to have drums and bass rehearsals. Like we are we are going to craft whatever is going on here. We're gonna, just the two of us, we're gonna figure this out before we go into the studio, before we present something, right? So
that's deep, George.
That's what I heard. That's my understanding. That's the story that I got. I'm sticking to it. I don't know whether it's
it makes
true.
sense though.
I don't care whether it's true.
but and I spending time with Christian, he spoke a lot about Ray.
Yeah.
And that would not surprise me if that was something that Ray did. And having spent a little bit of time with Ed Thigpen, it wouldn't surprise me that he would be into that. Like
right. Most definitely. Now it's one of those things, and the other thing, and this is kind of how I got my five together, is because I tried to at least have some sort of connection to them live. Like I've seen part of them live. And here's a story that I want to share with you and share with the audience. 2001, I'm playing the jazz festival in San Sebastian with Alexis Hightower, right? So, and as part of our contract agreement or whatever, we were able to see all the other concerts that were happening in that week-long festival, right? So we saw like a whole bunch of people. We saw Charlie Hayden with his band. We saw Charlie Hayden with Pat Metheny. It was awesome. We opened for Bobby McFerrin, who who had Richard Bona and Omar Hakim in the rhythm section. It was amazing. But then we saw Ray Brown with, I believe you're doing a podcast today, or your webcast or something live
Yeah,
today
I'm doing a thing with Jeff.
with
Yeah.
Jeff Hamilton. So check this out. We saw Ray Brown play with Jeff Hamilton. And I kid you not, the way they played made
Yeah.
us play better.
Oh man, they had a real hookup.
I was like, this is some other level shit.
Yeah.
Okay?
Yeah.
Because here we are with all of our backgrounds, with some New Yorican people, we had some,
Yeah.
African American, we had me, we had a violin player, like with all of our backgrounds, completely different generations, no real connection to Ray Brown.
Yeah.
I've been to a clinic, big deal. I saw him live, a couple times. But then I see him there at this festival, and the way he and Jeff Hamilton played, I kid you not, like we all played better. That was just, how is that possible, right? I mean,
well, and I think too, if you want to go a little bit more for a second scientifically into like what him and Ray had, Ray played a little bit more on top, right? But Jeff has that real big wide beat that's kind of in the middle, and so it's this really interesting tug and pull of like Ray and his, like very much like this is where it is, and Jeff sort of surrounding that beautiful point of a beat. And I think that's why they were able to have such a really good hookup. And I from what I hear, they had a great relationship.
Right. So my second choice was the Oscar Peterson trio with Ray Brown, Ed Thigpen. Those are the records, because also I saw Ray play live, and it made me play better. It made our entire band play better, and I was like, this is some serious mojo going on here. Anyway, who is your number 3?
Right. So my number 3, I started sort of traditional, and then I'm making my way to something a little more open. So I think for me, I'm going to mention a McBride record that changed my life, because when I think it was like 16, 17, I started checking out all these different records. So I was like going through all the Blue Note catalog and Prestige and all that stuff. But then it was, I came to jazz in the 90s where it was that heavy verve, like Young Lions era. Where Josh and Hargrove and all those, Antonio Hart, McBride, they were all putting out their major records. So anyway, there's a record called Family Affair, Christian McBride record, and it's featuring him and Gregory Hutchison on drums. And that rhythm section taught me a lot about how to play like in a modern sense, because I feel like with Philly Joe and PC and Vernell and Israel, it's kind of like a evergreen. Like here's what we all hope to get to. Versus Greg Hutchison and McBride, like I got to see them play a lot, and then obviously I got to play a lot with McBride, and Greg and I are now friends. So it felt more accessible and more attainable. And then what I loved about that record was they went from like a little bit of swing, but they played a lot of funk on that record. They played really open. So it was the first time I started hearing in the jazz context, like, how do guys that can play bop, but also like how do they open up and sort of play current, like in a way that represents who they currently are?
Yeah, most definitely. That's a great choice. That's was that the album produced by George Duke?
Yeah.
I knew it. Yeah. That's a really good album.
It's a good record, and it's a great sounding record.
Yeah. And that combination of McBride and Hutchinson is fantastic. There's just no two ways about it. Yeah. If anybody who's watching, check out there's a live video on YouTube with George Duke, Christian McBride, and unfortunately I forgot who the drummer was, but it's just the 3 of them at at a jazz festival. I want to say somewhere Southeast Asia, maybe Singapore, something like that. Anyway, the 3 of them are throwing down like nobody's business, right?
And it's Hutch, Duke, and McBride?
I don't think it's Hutch, to be honest.
It might be Ronald Bruner.
I think that's
because they did a lot of trio gigs with him.
Yeah. That might be him.
Yeah,
it's fantastic. It is really fantastic. I always say that, and that's the first time I saw Christian McBride, I was like, okay, well let me hear this, because everybody's been talking about it and all that. And then I saw him. He was playing at the Blue Note, and I came away with this idea of this dude sounds like he has been playing for 2 lifetimes already.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's really what he sounds like. That's I mean,
Yeah.
this the mastery of the instrument, of course, the lyrical content and all of
Right.
that, and the groove it sounded like he had been playing for 2 lifetimes already.
Yeah,
It's
and the
incredible.
big thing for him is a guy who had an opportunity beyond his immense talent, but he's had an opportunity to literally play with greatness, right?
Yeah.
So you're talking about a guy who was in Freddie Hubbard's band,
Right.
who, Ray was like a second father to him,
Right.
and then all the other elders, he got to play with all of them. And
Right.
so he got to kind of catch that last era of like Dizzy and all those guys that were still kind of around
Yeah.
versus like my generation, even some of your generation,
Yeah.
some people we just missed,
Yeah.
So I think there's his own, virtuosity, but in the midst of the virtuosity is this guy that sort of a lot of people got to lay their hands on him,
Right.
and from different sides,
Yeah.
from the James. I mean, he got to hang with James Brown and all those guys, and he got to, hang with George, and George, loved him as well. So, here's a guy who's had the world at his fingertips. So, to your point, it makes sense that he should play for like he's been playing for 2 lifetimes because he's had a chance to get that insight and that coaching from those guys.
Play better.
Yes. You better.
All right. So who's your next? Oh,
You have to give me yours.
It's mine, right? All right.
Yeah.
So, obviously, I had to include this following pairing, this following situation, simply because we have just lost the great Paul Jackson, right?
Yes.
And so my number 3 is Paul Jackson and Mike Clark with the Herbie Hancock Headhunters. The album that I put into my playlist is Thrust. The thing about Paul Jackson that just did it for me, and my introduction to him was that he did an album with Mike Clark called The Funk Stops Here. This was in the early 90s. And with that album, there was an accompanying VHS instructional video cassette, right? And that was what the first thing that I caught from this was, I don't know where the one is anymore, and and to a certain degree I didn't care. You know what I mean? Like, it was so strong, and it was so good that I was like, the sky is the limit.
Right.
It really, like, that, it really brought that point home to me. Like, you can be, when you start learning, there's always the emphasis on don't overplay, don't underplay, play the right thing at the right time, etc., etc. And all of that is important. And I'm a big, I'm, a lifelong scholar of that and a big fan of that thinking. But what that duo kind of told me was, as long as you're playing correct, it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
It didn't matter anymore. It didn't matter. Like, they were both super busy, but they were so in tune with each other, and they worked so well together that who cares whether this one is busy or that one is busy, as long as we're moving in the same direction together.
Yeah.
As long as we're working together, as long as we're communicating.
Yeah.
Who cares? It was yeah.
Well, it's funny you talk about, like, it felt right, and I think, it's funny. One of the things one of my coaches, a person who I talk to from time to time, always says, he says, there's no such thing as right or wrong. There's just restarts and results, right? And so when you talk about this idea of, like, I don't know if it was right or wrong for them to overplay or underplay, but what felt right was what they did. And I think, to your point about result, basically that was the result. The result was this thing that was intangible, that felt incredibly organic,
right?
And that's why I always say to people, like, especially when I teach music, I'm like, there is no right or wrong. There's what feels good, right? For me, it's right because people are tapping their toes, or somebody comes up to you afterwards and they say, "Oh my God, I really enjoyed it." So I think, to your point about that Headhunter stuff, it may have been over people's heads in some way, but it also changed music, and it also felt incredibly right because they were doing something that was, like, in tandem with where we all were or what we all wanted, or not we, because I wasn't there, but what
no, I hear you.
time. You know what I mean?
Yeah, most definitely.
Like it was a natural evolution. Because I feel like with Herbie and Miles, like those guys, even Chick, like those guys that like changed the course of music. I feel like they did because they were going in a direction that people wanted them to go.
Right.
So whether they were ready for it or not, there's these changes and things that people did or that they did that people resonated with. And I think that's what made it feel right, you know?
Right. No, most definitely. It's absolutely. It is the thing like with Paul Jackson was just, there are no limits anymore.
Right.
You know, there are no, you might think that whatever limits there are, you are bringing them with you.
Right.
And he was, at least for me, he was like the example. Like, if you want to be like as busy as you want to be and then all over the instrument,
right,
you can do all of that, you know.
Right.
Yeah, if you can pull it off, you can do it. End of story. Just put it out there. So that was, you know, and Mike Clark's drumming has so much like finesse to it, and at the same time like this incredible mixture of finesse and power.
Yeah,
you know, I hear it in your playing. I hear it in you know, in Manu Katche's playing. You know, of course, like last week I had the great Ron Jenkins on, and he, you know, he was talking about Buddy Williams and the Buddy Williams touch.
Buddy. Yeah.
I mean, that's, you know, that's again that combination of finesse and power, right? And that is something that's just I don't know. I don't know how to put it other than magical, but I know that there's also a lot of concept and a lot of work behind it. So I don't necessarily want to, you know, only put it into the realm of fantastical allegories.
Right.
You know, it's very real, you know?
Well, yeah, no, but I feel the same way about your playing too. I mean, I think, you know, especially as an electric bass player, because I feel like, you know, as an upright player, I mean, it's very easy to me to hear somebody sound on upright because the instrument is so signature in and of itself. Whereas in an electric, I think, it's very easy for people to kind of blend in and have a very kind of ambiguous tone. Right. But I feel like with you, it's the same way. Like you got this, it's this blend of bottom and all, you know, all the stuff you want from a bass player. But then there's like that little bit of thing that you can't really explain, you know, that is that extra. Beauty,
I appreciate that. Yeah,
no, I mean, I never forget, man, we did that record with the gospel choir, you know, from France. And so I remember, you know, and first, you know, I was just trying to find a really qualified cat to come in. And so you came in. But then like when I was listening to playbacks, I was like, damn, like, what is he? Is there like something extra on the string? You know, it's like, you know, and that's why, you know, we've been working together now for 10 years because I can't really explain what it is, but I know it's something that I like, you know, in addition to the professionalism and all the other stuff that you're known for. But I think, like you said, I think part of what we love about the great musicians is there is that intangible thing that we can't really explain that makes its way into our touch and whatever. So
most definitely. All right, number 4. Before I go into the story about that recording session, but I don't want to waste the time.
So I'll tell you. So number 4 for me, as we keep making our way out of sort of the jazz realm, there's 2 guys that mean a lot to me, and the drummer has changed my whole concept of groove playing. And that is the record John Mayer Continuum. But I kind of look at them as like a set of dual or sort of dual records, which is Continuum and then John Mayer Trio. And that's Pino Palladino and Steve Jordan.
Yes.
And I think in the last 20, well, I would say definitely 10 years, their combination of what they have created as a unit in the last 10 to 15 years is definitely on the side of music history, because it's rooted to me in like the Motown stuff and all of that, and then all the great rock things, and then the combination of jazz and Pino and Steve both have this like really interesting, you know, like this wide breadth of influences and what they can do. But their playing has definitely changed my life. And that record Continuum, you know, which I obviously won a Grammy or whatever, I think it changed the course, not of music, but I think it changed the course of what a pop record could be. You know, I feel like John Mayer brought back this acoustic element to a pop record with Steve in the way that I don't know that other people have been able to do. I think pop immediately was, all right, let me get the 808s out and all that other stuff, versus I think they synergize or re-energize the hunger for just acoustic talent, but with really good songwriting.
Yeah. No, I totally get that. It's funny you have Pino in there because he's in my list as well.
Yeah.
With a different combination though. That album, that combination of Pino and Steve Jordan. I only know them. I never really listened to Continuum that much, but I listened to Try, to the live album. Yeah, I definitely listened to that.
Try, well, and Try was cool, but Try was like, to me, going to the bottom line to hear them, right?
That's true.
Versus Continuum is them, at Capitol Studios.
Right.
Piecing together a masterpiece of a record.
Yeah. That's a dope distinction. All right, so my number 4, check this out, is a weather report rhythm section. Yeah, and it's the rhythm section of Omar Hakim and Victor Bailey.
Wow.
And a lot has been said about both of them. I'm a lifelong fan of Omar Hakim. His concept, his playing, and like everything about him is awesome and is gold to me. Victor Bailey, I have this connection with because the first solo bass album that I ever bought was Victor Bailey's Bottom Up, and I still I bought the vinyl back when Tower Records was still alive. That was for a long part, like if someone had told me like, okay, bass players can be leaders, Victor Bailey was my go-to. Like that was my go-to, the template, so to speak, right?
Wow.
The reason why I'm playing a Pensa bass is because, which is my favorite bass, is because of Victor Bailey.
Wow.
That sound has just been with me all the time. Wow. And then I did see both of them, Omar Hakim and Victor Bailey, played together. They did like a small club tour in Europe. This must have been somewhere between 93 and 94, 92 and 94, right? And they came to Vienna. And the one thing that I'll never forget, and which is, why they made this list, is they were breathing together. You know how you can see, like, every now and then you see these videos of Omar Hakim playing, and he goes like, he does this kind of thing, and that's him breathing in and breathing out, right?
Yeah.
And Victor Bailey was standing next to him, is same thing.
Wow.
They were breathing together. Okay, wow. That is unbelievable. And lastly, I studied in Berkeley for a summer semester in '94, right? And that's when I was introduced to, thinking of the name of the album right now, Live from Tokyo. It's a live album from Tokyo, Domino Theory, that's it. And there's a live movie or a live video of that particular concert, and it just blew me away. It just blew me away. There seemed like no boundaries. Certainly just a fearlessness in execution, right? And this is opposite Wayne Shorter and Joe Zawinul, right? Like two heavyweights, like coming out swinging. And here are these two, and the great Mino Sinello was also playing percussion in that incarnation of the band. But yeah, Victor Bailey and Omar Hakim, throughout their entire history together, throughout their careers, like this kind of started becoming examples for quality. Right?
Wow.
So really just quality. Quality is one of those things, and it's sort of a recurring theme in my live videos that it's very difficult to pinpoint, right? It's very difficult to say this is quality. It doesn't have attributes or anything like that, but it is something that's unmistakable to whoever the listener is. It's they say beauty is in the eye of the beholder, that kind of thing.
Absolutely.
Victor Bailey and Omar Hakim became examples of quality for me, and this really, also, let's not forget, like, to step into Weather Report at the time when they did step into Weather Report takes a lot of courage, takes a lot of, like, understanding who you are and what you are about
Yeah.
and all of that, right?
Yeah.
And they just did it. So it's, oh man, I had to include them. There's
Man,
just no.
what's that record? The Weather Report record with them.
Domino Theory.
Oh, so it's Domino Theory is the name of the
Yeah,
record. Okay,
Domino Theory. Yeah.
great. So
At least I think that's what. Let me just before I tell you something that's not correct. Let me see if I can bring it up. Yeah, no, it's Domino Theory.
Domino Theory. Great. Great. Yeah, I would say, and then along those lines, sort of getting to like my fifth record, I would say that same kind of magic and connection, where they were breathing together and there was this freedom and beauty. I have to go with A Love Supreme, and that's Jimmy Garrison and Elvin Jones.
Oh wow.
Because I think that when you talk about Victor, like I haven't checked out a lot of those records, so that's why I wanted to get that from you. Like I feel like there's certain gaps in my listening, and I never got to a lot. Like I've heard Weather Report, but I haven't gotten to a lot of that stuff. But when I think about Jimmy and Elvin, and I feel like, you know, with PC and Philly, they established like this is the line, or this is the pendulum, you know.
Right.
Then to me, Elvin and Jimmy said, okay, now we're gonna break the line, or we're gonna move it, or we're gonna swing the pendulum, you know. And I think A Love Supreme was that, where they gave you everything you needed, but then they shifted the music in all these different places. And I feel like they didn't play that traditional, you know, on the floor, and what, you know, it was I don't know, I feel like that record changed how a lot of people heard their roles even.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like Elvin came up with these grooves and these things that were very different than, you know, again, dang, you know, Spang-a-lang. So
right.
I ended with that because I felt like that record, when it came out, what it did, how it affected a lot of the musicians, because I'm certain all the musicians we've mentioned today, Pino and Steve included, I know for Steve actually has the cymbals. He has Elvin cymbals from A Love Supreme.
Oh wow.
Yeah, he got them in an
deep.
auction.
That's deep.
But I know all of those musicians were affected or impacted by that record.
Yeah.
So I'd be interested to hear what you think, you know.
Oh yeah, no, this, you know, this, it's funny that you say this, because just like you have like moments in your listening habits that perhaps need, you know, that need to be filled in. I have that as well.
Wow.
Coltrane is one of those artists for me, you know.
Really?
Well, here's the thing. I'm a big fan of his with Miles Davis.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah, I'm a huge fan of his, like in the quintet with Cannonball, and PC. You know, that was actually the album that I almost put in here. Paul Chambers, Jimmy Cobb.
Something else, right? Or are you talking about Kind of Blue?
It's no. It's an album called Stella by Starlight, and it's the 58 sessions or something like that. I don't know whether it's a real album or whether it was a bootleg or something like that.
A compilation. Yeah,
I listen to that all the time.
Wow.
And it had PC in it, Jimmy Cobb, it had Bill Evans on piano, Cannonball alto, obviously, Coltrane on tenor, and Miles Davis on trumpet. So you know, it was a sextet as such. It was just fantastic. So I love Coltrane's playing in that context, right? And I listened to a lot of that. And I did listen to Giant Steps, obviously. I mean, everybody has, you know. But I never really put too much time into it. You know, I never put too much time into Coltrane. It's definitely something that's on my list of things to listen to, you know. So my number 5 is, and this will make you laugh, it's Pino Palladino with Chris Daddy Dave.
Oh, what record is that?
It's not necessarily a record. I mean, they do have recorded work together, but what I caught was there are 2 live videos on YouTube with D'Angelo. Recorded, recorded live in Zurich, in the tour following the latest D'Angelo, or maybe between the two, between Voodoo and the latest D'Angelo album. And what caught me about that was that quality of, you hear something that's completely new, that you have never heard before, and it sounds like you have always heard it.
Wow.
Right? It is so, either in its concept or in its execution, whatever, in its, the way it's put together. I don't really know, or do I care what the reason is for it.
Right.
But it sounds like you have always heard it. And that is, that's incredible. So the two of them, and here's maybe the one thing that does stand out, or that immediately stands out, is Chris Daddy Dave's playing is taking pretty much everything to another level in terms of the inclusion of 808 drum beats, sounds, all of that conceptually into a kit.
Yeah.
Right. So all of a sudden you don't have to, ride the ride cymbal anymore, or the hi-hat. Every now and then it'll be okay if you just go on the hi-hat, and that's it, right?
Right.
Everything else is like, it's already there anyway,
Yeah.
So that I thought was sort of next level. I'm gonna put, I didn't get to putting the links for the YouTube videos into the description of the video, but I will eventually put it in there.
Cool.
But yeah, so that was my last. And Pino, I've been a fan of Pino for a very, very long time, and the reason why I put him into this list is because his playing, there's a lot of Motown in his playing. There's a lot of Jameson in his playing. There's a lot of Stevie Wonder's left hand in his playing. There's also a lot of this this British bass player who I like a lot, by the name of Danny Thompson, who's an upright player.
Okay.
Right? And Danny Thompson is, I've known him through recordings with Kate Bush, where he does incredible slide work, and again, like, the sky is the limit. You just completely different concept altogether. So Pino kind of put all this into his sound, and that made a lot of sense to me. So now we finished the 5 that we thought about, and all of that. Okay, let's do rapid fire.
Okay.
Yeah. So rapid fire. Who else? Honorable mentions.
Joshua Redman record featuring my main man Ruben Rogers and Greg Hutchison.
Ooh, okay. Let me throw one in there. Okay. Erykah Badu, Hubert Eves IV, and Poogie Bell. Yes.
Poogie, I love Poogie.
Yeah.
Man, I was just about to mention another one. So there is. Oh, I was gonna say Kenny Garrett's trilogy with Brian Blade and Chris Thomas.
Oh, wow. All right, let me throw this at you. Marcus Miller and Buddy Williams.
Yes. Okay.
Behind David Sanborn, Hideaway. That's the name of the album.
Yes. Man, since you talk about that Poogie, that live record, On and On, that was well, we're gonna talk about that. Then we got to talk about Voodoo. Questlove and Pino.
No doubt.
And I know there was a lot of different rhythm sections because Voodoo apparently was just like, it was like a movement that took years to record. But I definitely think, Questlove and what he and Pino were able to create was pretty special.
Oh yeah, no doubt. All right, here's one thing. I'm gonna throw out a curveball, and that is the rhythm section of the Wailers. Family Man.
Wailers. Yes, Carlton Barrett.
Yes.
Family Man. So it's funny you say that. When I got a chance to spend a lot of time with Steve Jordan and just hanging out, because when I was really getting into producing, I was fortunate to get connected to him, and he kind of took me under his wing. And so I would ask him about different drummers, because I would be going crazy over all the stuff he did, and he'd be like, "Man, Ulysses, I appreciate you, but I need you to check out like my influences." So he led me to, which I'm sure you know this guy, Al Jackson Jr.
Oh damn.
So I went in, I went to Memphis. I did a whole thing on Al. I spent a year, probably 2 years, just studying Al Jackson Jr., buying Rogers drums. It was a whole thing. It was obsessive. Then the next guy he talked a lot about was Carlton Barrett. And so I checked out all this Bob Marley, and like, So anyway, yeah, I'm so glad you mentioned those guys.
Yeah, the Wailers are
Yeah,
unbelievable. Family Man, like
yeah,
nobody. It's so easy to kind of brush past the intricacies, the difficulties, and the incredible responsibility that
right.
Family Man shouldered without even thinking about it. Okay, because you play those songs, you play those lines,
Yeah,
and try to move one iota, and it's not gonna work out. Okay,
yeah,
it's so strong, right? It's so
yeah,
strong.
and even in what you talked about, George, about like OP trio, like with Ray and and Ed, I feel like Carlton and Family Man must have had discussions. I mean, because to your point, they framed it very much like trio record. I mean, there were sections, and I mean, I
Yeah,
agree
yeah.
with.
Yeah, totally. All right, who's your next?
Oh man, I mean, so then we can't miss. I'll just say all James Brown rhythm sections.
I know, yeah,
You can't. I mean, you can't. You know.
that's
I mean, that's like that's you can't mention rhythm section, bass and drums without talking about those guys.
that's true. That is very true. I mean, I had the great fortune of working on a workshop about of a musical about the life of James Brown, right?
Wow.
Um, and so I had to take a deep dive into, you know, I knew some of it, of course. You know,
Mhm.
you learn a lot of songs over the course of any kind of learning experience, and you know, you learn a lot of James Brown songs, or some James Brown songs, but I really had to go in deep, right?
Mm.
um and yeah, the minute you start going in deep and kind of analyze, maybe not analyzing, I don't want to say analyzing, but the minute you try to play along or play it, right, you realize how deep the pool really is, right?
Yep.
um take one element out, and chances are it's not gonna, or try to exchange one element and do
Right.
something else,
Right.
it's not gonna work out. No, it had to be this, and it had to be exactly like that, right?
Yep.
It's a high art form. The way he put the music together, and the way those players did what they did. There's
Yeah.
you know, a lot. It's very much like the Funk Brothers, very much like, you know,
Absolutely.
the classic rhythm sections of, be it Muscle Shoals, Fame,
Mhm.
you know, Jackson Highway, the Swampers, be it the Beatles, you know, be it, you know, like all of these rhythm sections really do have a place, you know,
Yeah.
in musical DNAs of hopefully contemporary musicians, you
Right.
know. But here's another one that I have three more rapid fire. Well, actually, I got a bunch more, but um, one that I wanted to point out was Fred White and Willie Weeks.
Yep.
And that's the rhythm section behind Donny Hathaway's live album.
Wow.
Yeah. And so Willie Weeks was, he says in interviews that was, you know, he had just gotten to his concept, what he calls his
Wow.
concept. Like, this is who I am. This is my musical personality. This is it, right? And he put all of that into playing behind Donny Hathaway, right? And Fred White is from the White family of Chicago, whose
Oh, come on.
brother is Maurice White and Verdine
Wow.
White.
Okay.
Yeah, Fred
Wow.
White was the first drummer for Earth, Wind, and Fire.
Wow.
So when you hear old Earth, Wind, and Fire, you hear the same drummer as Donny Hathaway live, right?
Wow.
Yeah, that's pretty deep. That is, you know, so I had to include that, like that would be like an honorable mention, to say the least, you know.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. I mean, it's you know, it's so many, and also with guys like you and I, the range is so broad,
Yeah.
right? You know,
Yeah.
because you could go deep into the jazz world, you could go into the session world, and then we hadn't even gotten into like, you know, we got to mention, which you probably know the credits better than me, but the Wiz soundtrack.
Oh
I
yeah.
mean, I know that's not that was Gad on drums, right?
That's Steve Gadd and Anthony Jackson. Yeah.
Okay, yeah. So, you know, I mean, we hadn't gotten into that Broadway world of like all the
Yeah. I mean,
And, you know, so this thing could go.
yeah, any combination with those two players, and that's
Yeah,
why I didn't put them into my list because they sound great. With Steve Gadd sounds great with Tony Levin. He sounds great with
right,
Will Lee. You know,
right,
Anthony Jackson sounds great with Cliff Almond. He sounds great with
right,
Horacio Hernandez. You know,
right.
he sounds great with. I mean,
Yeah.
the
And
list
then
goes. That's why I was like, this is difficult.
yeah, and then you gotta mention, if you're gonna mention Steve Gadd, you gotta mention Stuff, you
Yeah,
know, and
of
what's
course.
my man who played?
Gordon Edwards.
I mean, the stuff they did together, right? I mean,
Uh,
so it's, you know,
Yeah,
anyway,
this
it
this
could go
this a
on and on and on.
bottomless pit. My
Yeah.
last combination is, and by far not my least, but the reason why I wanted to mention them is because that was the only rhythm section or the only time where I actually got behind a drum set
What?
back in Vienna, and I played along.
Wow.
And
Wow.
that was Tina Weymouth and Chris Frantz from the Talking Heads.
Oh man, yeah. I said I don't know much about
Yeah,
that. I got
so that is just a lot of fun. All right, and for
cool.
someone who never played drums before, who just
Yeah.
figured out like, okay, this is my left foot, this is my right foot,
Yeah.
that kind of thing. It totally made sense. Tina
Yeah.
Weymouth lays it down either on bass or on synth bass. There was also um, at the time the album is called Stop Making Sense, right, which is sort of an art movie
Okay.
that is awesome, right? There's something very very unique about it, and it even made sense to teenage like 12-year-old me
Hmm.
back in Vienna, like as far removed from this
Right.
entire culture as you can imagine.
Right.
But that particular output just made a lot of sense, and it made me forget about any kind of, you got to learn this or anything. Like,
Right. 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 Right.
no,
Right.
you got to be behind this, and you just got to play
Yeah.
the shit out of the drums, and just
Yeah.
be in it. So that's why I wanted to mention them, that they
Yeah.
are, they are a husband and wife team, and
Wow.
they just put down something that's really remarkable and really magical to a certain degree.
Yeah, I would say just I got to close out. We can't talk
Yeah,
about
yeah.
bass drums and not mention Plantation Lullabies, Michelle
Oh,
and Cello and Gene Lake. I'm like, you gotta.
yeah.
So anyway,
It's like mic drop, boom.
Mike, yeah,
Yeah,
I'm like, because when you start talking about them, like Talking Heads, and you're talking about some of the other cats, I'm like, in terms of paradigm shifting moments, and
yeah.
Gene Lake is such an underrated musician,
He's
but
just
I think Michelle and Cello, you know, yeah, man.
yeah. There's nothing that can be that there's no superlative
Right.
that is that cannot be applied to her output. There's just no two ways about that.
Yeah.
Well,
So
anyway, listen, Ulysses, thank you
yes.
so much for
Thank
spending
you,
your
man.
time today. It was awesome having you here.
Thank
To all those watching, to all those listening, thanks so much for checking in. Be good to yourself. Take care of yourself. And as I say every week, I'm gonna leave it with that. Be kind, be cool, and remember we only have each other. All right, everybody, take care.
Take
Later.
care, George.
Later.
Thank you, brother.
All right.
Peace.